Srimad Bhagavad Gita Chapter 6 Shlok 22 to 47. Lord Krishna says, while attaining the divine advantage of realizing God, one considers that there can be no greater blessing. One achieves a state when deep sorrow or anguish cannot disturb at all. That which is unattached with the sorrowful world and that which is known as yoga needs to be experienced. It is one's divine duty to practice such yoga with enthusiasm, patience, and decisive interest. When the desires originating from one's vows are given up and senses and sensual objects are fully controlled, when one is gradually starting to stabilize one's mind with patient wisdom in the thoughts of the Almighty, during this time he should not brood over anything else. The unstable and restless mind wanders among various worldly objects, and the practitioner must shift his mind away from these objects repeatedly and should try to stabilize it in the manifestations of the Almighty. The person whose mind has become peaceful in all respects and whose Rajogun, mode of passion of material nature, has quietened, and by making efforts to achieve oneness with the Almighty, this yogi accomplishes genuine, exquisite joy. The virtuous yogi, engaging his mind in the prominence of the Almighty, continuously experiences the joy of realizing the Almighty. The person who through yoga maintains equanimity is able to experience the presence of the Almighty in all things. He is also able to see all beings in the Lord Almighty. The person who finds me, the Almighty, in all living beings and who is also able to see all living beings in my all-pervading form becomes the person for whom I am never invisible. He is able to see me at all times. The person who gets into a constant mode of worshipping the omnipotent in me, Vasudeva, is the yogi who, while performing all his various deeds, in fact dedicates all his performance to me. The person whose attitude towards all beings is constant and the same as towards his own personal life, and he who finds no distinction between happiness and sorrow, is the yogi who is considered best among yogis. Arjun said, Madhusudan, the yoga which you have defined as maintaining the steady attitude of mind amidst diverse situations, according to me, due to the fickle nature of mind, is very difficult to achieve. Because Krishna, this mind is extremely capricious and vacillating. It is equally strong and obstinate. Therefore, I consider controlling the mind is as difficult as stopping the wind. Lord Almighty said, Mahabhava, there is no doubt that mind is extremely fickle and difficult to control. But with continuous practice of unattachment and constant efforts, it can come under control. For the person who is unable to control his mind, yoga is unachievable. But the person who has controlled his mind can attain yoga easily with constant effort and practice. This is my considered opinion. Arjun said, Shri Krishna, what happens to the person who has devotion towards yoga but is not disciplined enough and his mind drifts away from yoga and who is not in a position to achieve the state of self-realization? What is his state? Mahabhavo, such a seeker who is lost from the divine path of the Almighty, what happens to him? Defeated from both sides, does he end up in disaster? Shri Krishna, you are the only one who is capable of completely clarifying this doubt of mine. It is not possible to find another who can explain this difficult subject clearly. The Lord Almighty said, Parth, such a person is neither ruined in this world nor after his death. Because, dear Arjun, the person who follows the path of salvation of the soul of realizing Almighty is never degraded. The unfulfilled person reaches the abode of the noble and virtuous, and after residing there for many long years is born again in the families of respectable people who follow the path of purity. In other words, instead of taking birth in an average family, he is born to a family of the enlightened and the wise. Indeed, such a birth is rare achievement for an average human being. Gathering there the sanskars of great wisdom, he achieves yoga of constant attitude without much effort. Enthused with the effects of this yoga, he makes even greater efforts to attain realization of the Almighty than ever before. The yoga brushed Purush is propelled by the previous practices and is undoubtedly attracted towards the Almighty. Such a seeker of yoga of constant attitude transcends the ill effects of sakam deeds or deeds done by selfish end in view. But the yogi who is a practitioner and is making best of efforts with the force and power of the previous births becomes free from sins during the current birth and soon achieves salvation. A yogi is superior to a tapasvi and is also superior to the wise persons who have knowledge of the Shastras, and is undoubtedly better than those who perform deeds with selfish ends in mind. Therefore, Arjun, you must become a yogi. Among all the yogis, the one who worships me constantly with devotion is most dear to me. Thus spoke Lord Krishna to Arjun.